Afternoon, welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss progress being made in secure cloud computing in the federal government. With me today on the show are Dave McClure, the Associate Administrator of GSA, Chris Greer, Senior Advisor for Cloud Computing at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Herb VanHook, the Deputy Chief Technology Officer, BMC Software, Rear Admiral, United States Navy retired, Elizabeth Hight, the VP for Cybersecurity Solutions Group, U.S. Public Sector at Hewlett-Packard, and David McLaughlin, the founder and CEO, Blue River IT. Let's get into the discussion here. Let's start with Dave McClure over GSA. Dave, I know GSA is playing some major roles with the cloud initiatives in the federal government. Can you talk a little bit about some progress you see being made in this area?
Yeah, Jim, thanks, and thanks for having me.
Sure.
I think we're making great progress. I can say that because I think cloud computing is becoming ingrained in the fabric of computing of the federal government. So that's the real test for us. And you look at all the areas where cloud was 3 years ago versus now, there's been an expansion. Hosting, email, test development, websites, CRM, collaboration tools, core processing for workflow are now in cloud environments.
Right.
So I think that's really a step in the right direction.
Yeah, clearly. I know years ago when we first started talking cloud, it just seemed to be naming that big thing we drew up on the board that we called the internet or whatever. And I think back then there were skeptics about where it's going, but I think over the last few years it's clear that it is a definite trend of the future and it's here to stay. Herb VanHook, tell us a little bit about how BMC Software is positioning to support your customers in this space and some progress that you see from your perspective here.
Thanks, Jim. BMC has been selling enabling technology to support cloud services and build out of cloud environments for a number of years. It's actually interesting, the point you made about the trend going forward on this. We've seen a lot of maturity over the last 4 years in terms of the federal perspective and their posture on cloud computing. I remember our first RFI actually came out from our very first one in cloud computing actually came from the federal government about 4.5 years ago. And it was very, very vague. It was 8 pages.
Right.
It was very thin.
Right.
And the ones we're getting today are much more well thought out and much more specific in terms of what they're looking for. And we're seeing it actually all across the federal sector in DOD and the intelligence agencies and in the civilian agencies. Everyone is trying to figure out how to capitalize on the benefits of cloud computing there.
Right. I remember way back when we first did our first show on the subject, we were still trying to figure out what it was. Now it seems to have taken on a life of its own, is moving forward. Chris Greer over at NIST, I know NIST plays significant roles both on the policy side, and I guess you are doing some things operationally also, but talk about some of the progress you see from the perspective of NIST.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Our role really is to promote the adoption of cloud computing by federal agencies. And so we've been working towards that goal by developing best practices, common language for describing cloud, a bit of an understanding of what that actually means, and the standards that enable folks to implement that. There are a couple of things that we're really excited about that are coming out very soon. The first is in the area of security, and one of the challenges, I think, in the adoption of cloud computing is that the provisions for security change depending on the implementation mode. And so we have worked with our government, academic, and commercial sector partners to develop a security reference architecture. We'll be releasing that document in the next week or so, and we hope your listeners will go to our website, take a look at that document, and send us comments so that we can get that right.
Good.
The second thing is in the area of accessibility, and we think that the cloud platform provides a really interesting opportunity to provide new solutions for accessibility, customized solutions for accessibility. And so we're launching a public working group on that. We're really just getting started. The Department of Education is a strong partner in that. And so in another week or so, also, we'll have on our website an opportunity to join the working group on accessibility. So we hope people will join in that too.
Terrific, fantastic. It's great news in terms of things moving. And yes, listeners, a good check that stuff out. The more help we can get for NIST and more feedback we provide you guys, I guess, the better fine-tuning we'll do. Betsy Hight, I guess you've sort of seen life from both sides here. You had your years in the military. Thank you for your service there. In terms of progress being made over at HP, how is HP positioning to support customers, and what kind of progress are you seeing moving along within the cloud environment?
Well, HP sees cloud as part of the new style of IT that's emerging worldwide. We have over 600 instances of clouds stood up in governments all over the world, as well as in our commercial sector. We are moving toward the concept that heterogeneity is the way of the future, and the way that we manage clouds and cloud computing, storage, accessibility, etc., has to be one based on open standards where we can manage multiple vendor capabilities and allow that client to have the environment that they need.
Yeah, terrific. I know that that interoperability issue has always been out there, and the heterogeneous environments and open sources and everything else, and how we're going to manage all that stuff. David McLaughlin, Blue River IT, tell us a little bit about how Blue River is positioning to support movement in this area and some progress you see from your perspective.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Blue River is a small business, and we act primarily as a systems integrator or managed service provider for different cloud computing products or services that are out there. So typically what we do is we work with our customers to define what would be the best cloud solution for them. That could be public, private, hybrid, what have you. We do quite a bit of the testing and development within these environments prior to presenting them to our customers. So we try and educate them primarily. You know, there's still a lot of questions out there as far as what cloud is. Right. Do we have to move everything to cloud? What does it mean? So we try and educate people more so on what they can leverage of what the existing architecture that they have in moving forward into a cloud environment.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. And your issue there about sort of like what is cloud. Let's talk a little bit about what is cloud. I mean, we have in my mind we've got private clouds, public clouds, hybrid clouds. Some agencies say we do data center consolidation, and we put some stuff and then we make it available to our components. That's cloud. Others say no, cloud is moving to an Amazon or a Google or a Microsoft or some other cloud provider. Others say, how do you see that shaping up between what's considered private, hybrid? Do you see sort of a mix in the future? Let's start with Chris. Greer at NIST. Chris, how do you see that mixing out in the government? You think we're going to see a movement towards more public, more private, or this hybrid world?
Jim, I think actually all three are growing, and I think, as Betsy pointed out, that each agency has a variety of mission applications that they can pursue in the cloud. The way they do that is going to differ depending on the type of service or information that they're putting into the cloud. In some instances, private cloud is the best solution. In other instances, a public cloud is perfectly fine. And so our goal at NIST is to ensure that the standards can apply to all three of those models, so that agencies are able to select the best choice for their need.
Okay, terrific. Dave, what do you think in terms of GSA? You're sort of like watching it across government more so than any particular agency. Do you see more movements towards, private, hybrid, public, a mix of all three?
I think it's a mix, and I agree with Chris. I think there's probably growth in all three areas. I think we're going to see for a while an interest in private clouds within government because they're viewed as more contained. And the boundaries are more defined.
Right. That
whereas
trust
issue. The public cloud solutions, though, are still robust. We have to remember, I think the issue for the government client is single tenant versus multi-tenant. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of skepticism when you start moving into these multi-tenant environments. What's happening to my information? How can I reconstitute it? So we're still going through a lot of learning and getting comfortable with the paradigm of cloud computing. I think you'll see government clouds grow where it's multi-tenant across departments and agencies. Mm-hmm. That seems to be a high growth area as well. But I think in general, compared to 3 years ago, when you're right, we were talking about definitions.
Right.
It's more about picking intelligently, smartly the solution set that I want to go to.
Yeah, terrific. Betsy Hight, HP, how do you see that? Are you looking with customers more towards helping them build cloud in their own agency, or are you looking to move things outside and be managed service, or sort of like all of the above?
Well, absolutely all of the above. Chris and Dave are exactly right. The current view of public clouds typically make you think that the information in those public clouds need to be citizen-facing services that are available to all, whereas a lot of organizations believe that their crown jewels that they want to keep private need to be in a private cloud. But I think the real key to that for most organizations will be the hybrid.
Right.
And I think it's the hybrid that will take off when organizations begin to get very comfortable about the security ramifications of having data in a place where they typically don't have quite as
Right.
much, quote, control.
Right.
But companies like HP are working on the keys to that particular kingdom. And the way that we advise our clients is to think about, gee, do you need a FIPS 140 compliant environment? Do you need that kind of control? What is actually not just the service level agreement, but the risk level agreement that you want to develop with your provider, whether it's a government provider or a private provider? So we go through the entire range of what are you trying to protect, who you're trying to serve, what contractual risk and service level agreements are appropriate for that information.
Yeah, excellent answer. And I think you're exactly right. I think most agencies are saying, look, stuff that's public facing that is sort of publicly available anyway. There's no reason it shouldn't be in a cloud, public cloud. Whereas some of our internal stuff, we're a little bit more guarded right now. Let's wait and see how this thing evolves before we're ready to move some of our critical stuff out there. But David, how about Blue River? How are you seeing in terms of the positioning here, the private-public hybrid?
We feel very much that it's going to be a mix. It's going to be really what's best for the agency. I mean, depending on the classification of data, the applications, where the users reside, all those things play a factor. Really what we've been trying to do is try and bridge the gap between what's a public computing cloud as opposed to what people have in their existing data center. For example, we can take someone's private storage, let's say on a NetApp, and attach it to an Amazon compute instance, so thereby leveraging both. So keeping the data within the data center, but having this great vast expandability of compute resources. So it's really going to be a mix, in our opinion. It just comes down to what works best for the particular agency.
Yeah, terrific. Herb VanHook at BMC, what do you think in terms of, what do you see the trends here in terms of the customers you're working with?
Jim, it's going to evolve quite a bit over the next few years. I mean, right now, what's acceptable or what's not acceptable today may be very acceptable 2 years from now in terms of things like data placement, in terms of security envelopes and things of that nature. But it is going to be a mixed world, for many, many years to come. So even though today there may be very good technologies for securing your data out in public cloud environments or more fortified external environments, we may not really have the procedures, the auditability, the controls, the compliance, the governance in place to actually make that effective. Right. And so as a result, we tend to still embrace and hug the data and keep it internal many times. But you're seeing this change actually, and a lot of what's going on in the private sector. The government will watch and see what happens and embrace it. I mean, if you take a look at some of the things in the financial industry today, for example, like at NASDAQ, they offer a secure storage cloud on Amazon, but they basically encrypt the data. The encryption keys are kept within, not in Amazon's world, but in a secure data center someplace. And so you'll see these types of merged models to basically take advantage of public or external cloud services, but also complement them with what you can do inside the data center.
Yeah, terrific. I think you're right. I think what I'm pulling out of this question and answer is, it's an evolving thing here. With the trust question and the experience question, I think things will begin moving a little bit more and more towards that public domain. But there's going to be some, steps along the way. Betsy, you have a comment on follow up on that?
I do, and that is. All of us, whether we're in government or industry, are beginning to understand the right questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And those right questions have everything to do with how does that information that's in a cloud working within this distributed environment that we're evolving to.
Right.
Where is that information going? Is the client happy with that? Does the client need some level of transparency relative to where the information resides, especially in the U.S. federal space? Much of that information needs to stay within the shores of the United States, and it needs to be accessible by only United States citizens. So I think part of the evolution is not just technology, but knowing what questions to ask of your cloud provider.
Yeah, excellent. Very good points there. Appreciate that. It's, focus on the results we're trying to achieve here and just what are the options to get those results. Well, with that private, hybrid, public, trust does get us to sort of some of the core of talking about security. Let's talk about some of the security concerns. My sense from following this over the years, doing these radio shows, is when we first talked cloud, the big question was, security. We can't move our data out there. And then there was questions about, do we know how to do service level agreements here? I mean, the risk now is being shared, right? I mean, the risk is now not just internal here with government, but we're going to turn some of our data over to a private source. And now there's a commercial source. Now we've got this shared risk thing. And security was seen back then as potentially a drawback. I think since then, some folks are saying, hey, no, you have it all wrong. This is an opportunity to look at security on a holistic approach, because over the last 20 years, we've been band-aiding security approaches and just patching things. Here's a chance to step back and take a look holistically. But anyway, security continues to be a hot topic. Dave McClure, what do you think? Is the government addressing those security concerns to try to make sure that that doesn't get in the way to prevent progress?
Right. And I pick up on what Betsy said. I think it's all about transparency and trust. If we can build a trust-based environment in government to deal with cloud computing, I think we're making great steps forward. So, we've introduced the FedRAMP program at GSA that is designed to introduce that trust and transparency. We have a baseline set of controls that we want cloud service providers to be tested against and show adherence to. We have independent assessments being done by third parties against those standards. And we're putting the results of the test into a repository that can be shared by the security officers within the federal government. So I think these are gigantic step forwards in terms of simplifying and focusing on the security standards that we need in place. A lot of challenges in this area, though. We're still working our way through encryption standards. Somebody mentioned that a moment ago. Multi-factor authentication, appliances outside of the control of the CSP that are getting plugged into these cloud solutions on a very fast basis, and boundaries.
Right.
Boundaries are a huge issue in defining security requirements. And so I think we've gone through a couple of years of real intense learning. I think we've got some good answers for things. There are other things that we're still, I think, realizing it is a risk-based decision on what the degree of controls are beyond what this baseline, and that's something that agencies just have to get comfortable with.
Yeah, and I know they're tough. I mean, I know from my days at CIO Treasury, all the bureaus had dramatically different security requirements. I mean, Secret Service requirements were obviously a lot different than the U.S. Mint, and they were different than IRS, and they were different than U.S. Customs, and trying to have a baseline and figure out, where it is you need to go and how much security is enough and what the baseline. How is NIST addressing that, Chris? Are you looking at that issue, sort of like a minimum set of requirements or some type of standards that you're looking to promote for security requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. Security is such an important part of cloud adoption, and some sense of understanding that space is really critical. For an agency, for example, if you're working with a cloud provider who's providing software as a service, the provider has much of the responsibility for configuration management and the applications themselves. On the other hand, if you're operating in an infrastructure as a service environment, your applications are running on that infrastructure, and you have configuration management responsibilities. So to address this, we've developed a principle we call the conservation of security controls.
Okay.
And that is there's a suite of security controls that are necessary as a whole, and that suite never changes. But who actually implements and has responsibility for each of those controls does change. And so in our security reference architecture, we've developed a tool for decision makers and implementers to see for the full suite of security controls in each of these models, which are my responsibility and which belong to the cloud provider. And that helps you in making decisions about how to implement.
Yeah, terrific. This is great. And I want to hear from our industry guest here, too, on the same subject. But we first need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Dave McClure from GSA, Chris Greer from NIST, Herb VanHook from BMC Software, Rear Admiral retired Elizabeth Hight from HP, and Dave McLaughlin from Blue River IT. We're talking cloud and secure cloud. When we went to break, we heard from our government guest. I'd like to hear from our industry guest here. We're talking about that question of addressing those security concerns to make the customer comfortable, that they can feel comfortable in a cloud environment. Let's start with David McLaughlin over Blue River. How do you go about addressing those security concerns in cloud environments?
So for us, we have to look at it from another point of view as well, because we're actually the ones that sign the other part of the SLA agreement. So the data sits in our environment, and we're the caretakers of that. So we certainly want to follow the guidelines of FedRAMP and NIST, what they set forth, but we also have the responsibility to go above and beyond. There's a joke in our company, we say, I don't want to be on the news for anything, poorly for us losing data or what have you.
Right.
So.
Right. I think every company has that.
Yeah,
same
I think
joke,
so.
as a matter of fact.
But we really have to look beyond that. And the standards that are set down or set forth are very important, and it's important to follow those. But like I said, we have to look at new technologies to try and keep ahead of the curve. It's a lot easier for people out there trying to get your data, or there's a lot more of them, as opposed to trying to just protect it. So you have to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I know every time we do the cybersecurity show, that's sort of like my pet peeve over the years, is we have to get proactive and stop fixing things after they break. Let's get out in front of them and get them, make sure they don't break in the first place. Herb VanHook, BMC, what do you think? How do you go about assuring your customers that you can address those security concerns?
Well, one of the things actually we've seen, Jim, is that you have to understand that the federal government and all the agencies have been at IT for many, many years. Right. And over these years, they've developed a body of best practices, a body of capabilities, a body of technology around protecting data, around secure computing, et cetera. Everything from the FISMA requirements to things like DISA-STIG and things of that nature, or Center for Internet Security adoption. So I'm finding that a lot of people want to bring those with them, those capabilities and those best practices to the cloud with them, whether they're looking at external clouds or in many cases when they're using technology to build internal private cloud environments. They still want those type of secure capabilities in there. And so one of the things that we do as BMC, our enabling technology enables pretty advanced configuration of those private cloud environments to adhere to those existing security standards. I realize they're going to evolve over time, and this is a clear opportunity to drive a new holistic set of security practices around it. But today I still find people still focused on the ones that are tried and true for them actually in their existing IT.
Yeah, I think the good thing too I see happening out there is, a lot of industry and a lot of companies in the security space understand that this is an issue, and therefore industry knows that there's a market there and stepping up to come up with some new ideas and creative ideas that I think will address some of the long-standing problems. Betsy Hight over at HP, how do you go about looking at that security question to make your customers, comfortable that they can, move in a cloud environment and feel secure?
We really look at it in three ways.
Okay.
First way is we participate in standards bodies, whether that's cooperating with NIST, working with the Cloud Security Alliance, of which we're a founder, working with the IEEE standards, et cetera, et cetera. So we're right in the middle of marrying technology with standards, and we're huge participants in the open environment movement. The second way we do it is we actually use all of these capabilities in our own facilities. We're a very, very large IT company. We use our own capabilities, and we use our own technologies and processes and procedures to protect our own data.
Practice what you preach.
That's right. We practice what we preach. And third, we think about the basics of security. Now, you can't just move what we have done for many, many years into a cloud environment, but there are basic principles to which you have to adhere. Something as simple as patching servers. So we've recently developed a capability where we can wake up servers that might be, quote, asleep in order to patch them so that when they actually come online, they are still in configuration. So we use a multi-pronged approach to advance our ability to be confident in our solutions and to allow our customers to be confident in them as well.
Right, terrific. Chris, you had a comment on that?
Yeah, Betsy brought up the point of the standards that are emerging, and you'd already pointed out, Jim, that the cloud environment is maturing, that the landscape is changing. So we've gone from sort of an exploratory phase to an implementation phase, and now standards are becoming an important part of that, and the participation of HP and others from the commercial sector in the development of those standards is absolutely critical so that we get them right. And these are not just national standards, they're international standards. And cloud services are a global market, so it's important that our commercial partners also engage in the standards processes.
Yeah, terrific. Hey, let me stay right with you, Chris, and let's talk about benefits. We're going through this whole cloud thing, presumably there are some benefits we're going to see of going through the process of migrating to cloud. The obvious one, I guess, is a cost reduction. But what other benefits do you see of moving to cloud environments? What do you think it's going to do to make the government better, let's say?
Right. So obviously cost savings is a major goal, and you pointed that out. Flexibility is a second goal that's quite critical, and being able to move from different platforms and environments for different needs and needs that change over time. Then finally, we think that this is a real opportunity for innovation, and I brought up accessibility before. You can imagine a cloud platform could give you considerable capabilities for accessibility by combining the device, the platform, and the application in new ways. You can compose accessibility solutions that are individually tailored so that the individual's needs can be taken into account. And so that's an example of an opportunity to do some really significant innovation because you have a cloud platform.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, and I think we got to get it done before our kids get in the workplace, because I think they're going to have a totally different idea of how this is all going to work. Dave McClure, what do you think? What are some of the benefits you see coming out of going through this process of moving to the cloud?
Well, I think Chris is right. We have to see cost savings. Cloud has been sold on cost savings. I do think, we're learning that the implementation of cloud computing can temper the amount of cloud savings that you actually get, depending on what model and how you implement it. But it offers enormous economies of scale that we did not have before. Speed. Cloud offers us the ability to actually do computing at processing capabilities unheard of a few years ago. So the ability to actually take raw, huge amounts of data and process it in a very well-configured, flexible environment is huge for government. Agility, focusing on applications and the use of data rather than the infrastructure, creates, I think, agility for the mission side to really pay attention to what they're doing with data to enable the service delivery they're in charge of. And then the last one I'd throw out is I believe that cloud actually can make us more secure. I think we have focused so much attention on cloud security that, believe me, having looked at what's being done by cloud service providers, it is, if it's done well and done in a very transparent, sharing manner, you can be very confident of the security that your data is experiencing in a cloud environment. So I think we can see an uptick in security rather than any kind of threats to security.
I agree with you. I've been in debates on this one. I agree too. I think we've gotten to a point with security where we don't even know what we have out there. There are so many patches and fixes and tools, and now with cloud, you can stop and say, time out here. Let's take a look at this. We can now put it into, we can bound it, and we can figure out how to really secure it. We can get rid of perhaps a lot of these Band-Aids that we've been using for the last 20, 25 years to fix these problems. So.
Yes, and as Chris knows, we're moving rapidly into continuous monitoring environments,
Right.
which will, again, change the paradigm of confidence and transparency into the security of the actual operations themselves. So that is a huge step forward that I think we can attribute to the cloud computing movement.
I've been writing some articles in continuous monitoring too, and I think you're right. I mean, now in open architecture world and open source world, there are some tremendous opportunities for dramatic increases in security. Let's hear from our industry folks on this question of benefits. Herb VanHook, BMC, what kind of benefits are you seeing your customers achieving by moving to cloud environments?
Well, I think Dave and Chris kind of nailed the big major ones there. I will tell you, probably for BMC, maybe 20% of our business is actually in the federal sector. Mm-hmm. And we see the predominant benefit people striving for there is a cost reduction or cost containment agenda. Right. And they get that through a number of things, through basically the granular consumption that cloud computing brings from an economic standpoint, and things such as labor cost takeout through extreme levels of automation, leverage capital assets through dense computing models. Those are all really good things. And those tend to be primary, actually, in the federal sector. When you move to the private sector, it's usually agility and velocity are the ones that are primary. Wow. So there is still a little bit of difference there, even though both of them are on the table. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I liked about what Chris said was, and a lot of people don't quite grasp this yet, but that cloud computing really is going to become a platform for innovation. The kinds of things that people can do with really fast delivered, fungible, low cost technology resources, the things they'll be able to do are just unbelievable. I mean, we can't even conceive of some of them now. So that platform for innovation, I think, is a very, very key thing.
Yeah, very good points. I know we've talked about some of the exciting things we had on a couple of shows just talking about the future, things in the future in between cloud and mobility and wireless and things like that. We sort of haven't even scratched the surface yet on where we can go with things, especially when bandwidth catches up and we get the wireless bandwidth out there and so forth to support some of these things. Betsy Hight, what do you think are some of the benefits you see your customers achieving that are moving to the cloud world?
I think in both the commercial and the government world, we're seeing that we can work wherever we are, because cloud computing allows information to be delivered anywhere, anytime, through any device, regardless of where that device was procured. So between the bring your own device, or what we in HP like to refer to as choose your own device, we've enhanced the productivity of people and industries and government throughout the world. So let's look at just census takers.
Right.
What could a census taker do in a much shorter period of time using electronic capabilities and not worrying about that particular device that they hold in their hand? Look at any kind of citizen-facing service, and look at those services of our first responders, of those who deploy for a living in order to meet danger where it is and to protect us as a nation. So I think the biggest benefit to the United States and its citizen is the ability to get information anywhere, anytime on a device that that particular organization approves for that information to reside on. And that, of course, brings up another whole issue of security and mobility, but they're all intersected. They're all interconnected, and it's a wonderful world that we're moving into.
Yeah, it really is. And then a lot of folks, a lot of our listeners have heard me say this over and over again. We're moving into a world where decision decision-making, time equals zero. I mean, your things are going to be happening in real time, and decision-making is going to be real time, and the devices are going to let that happen. David McLaughlin at Blue River, benefits. Always dangerous to be the last to answer a question because you can kind of say ditto, but is there some other points maybe you can add to this dialogue here?
Well, I agree a lot with Herb as far as the flexibility and the new things that you can do using a cloud architecture. There are companies now that are small that are able to develop a software and enable it for an enterprise across the industry that you just didn't see in the past. And the same goes for public entities that are able to deploy and test and manage an environment and then turn it off. So the cost savings are there. It's a really interesting time, and it's pretty exciting to be a part of a cloud movement, let's say. Yeah. But again, the flexibility is very important.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about challenges other than security, because I just have this sense that when you a large agency moving the cloud, and maybe that has a lot of components or a lot of bureaus, it might not just be that everybody raises their hand and says, oh yes, we agree with this, and so forth. There has to be some issues that need to be worked through. Let's start with Chris at NIST. Chris, what are some of the challenges other than that security challenge that need to be overcome to get to where we need to go with all this?
Yeah, Jim, there are many, and I'll focus on maybe a couple,
okay,
given the time. One of them is reliable measurement, the ability to measure cloud services in comparable ways. And so Betsy mentioned earlier service level agreements and risk agreements as well. And being able to compare the measurements that go with that service level agreement. Are you getting what you asked for? And can you compare that to what another vendor might provide? So a reliable measurement framework of common standards is critical for agencies. The second is we've said earlier that public-private hybrid clouds, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, agencies are using various different implementations of cloud for their various needs. Nonetheless, at times they need to be able to join those services together, and so interoperability and portability are a key challenge. If you think about it and extend that, you end up with a cloud of clouds environment, a meta cloud or an intercloud, the kinds of phrases that I've heard for merging clouds.
Yeah, interesting. I like that concept. Dave McClure, what do you think? What are some of the challenges you face other than that security issue?
I think there are three, Jim.
Okay.
One is control, and control can be expressed in terms of just I want my own thing, and I'm not happy unless I have my own thing I can grab. But I think control is also about accountability. So when you let go of something as a service and turn it over to someone else, I think in the government we have yet to go through a period where I feel comfortable in that environment because I'm the one going to the witness table on the Hill. Right. I'm the one the secretary is going to call when something doesn't work. So I think we have control things that we just naturally have to get through. Second one is acquisition. The acquisition process of the government is not user-friendly toward cloud computing.
Yeah, well, it's different.
So it's very different. It's a very services orientation. We're still operating with an acquisition world that is product-oriented. So I think that really creates challenges for acquisition officers, lawyers, and the guys trying to buy the stuff to get together and figure out how to make this work. And the third one is provisioning. The ability to provision in data centers and computing environments changes rapidly in the cloud environment. It creates governance challenges, knowing who is doing what, where is your data at any moment in time. So I think we can automate and make provisioning of the services in cloud very, very efficient. We have to match it to a governance process that we all feel comfortable with.
Right. I know that can be challenging too, because you've got if you put 15 people in the room and decide on governance, you're going to probably have 15 different positions as to how that should work. And working through those kinds of issues can be challenging. No pun intended on the challenge there. But I want to hear from our industry guest on this question too. But again, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Dave McClure from GSA, Chris Greer from NIST, Herb VanHook from BMC Software, Rear Admiral retired Elizabeth Hight from HP, and David McLaughlin from Blue River IT. We're talking cloud, secure cloud, and progress and best practices. And when we went to break, we had heard from our government guest here about some of the challenges you see other than the security challenge, which we've already drilled down a bit on. I'd like to hear from our industry guest on this same issue. Let's start with David McLaughlin at Blue River. David, what do you see some of the key challenges other than security in getting to where we're trying to go with this whole cloud environment?
One of the biggest challenges that we've faced is you can get through the technology phase and the adoption and understanding of the security and the pricing, but when you get to the SLAs and the negotiations of the terms and conditions, right, that's a challenge. I mean, you have to make sure that both parties are comfortable with it. For the government side, is this company going to be here in 5 years? Can I get my data back? Can I move my data? How do I know my data is protected? These are all things that need to be built into the terms and conditions. And that process alone, in dealing with attorneys going back and forth, can take quite some time. So it's something to be very carefully looked at. There's some of our customers that won't even go through the process until they understand what those terms and conditions will look like. And that makes a lot of sense, because you don't want to go all the way down the road and get to the point where we say, well, sorry, we can't do it. It's not acceptable. So I would say that's something that the public side should take a good look at and make sure that they're comfortable with what they're getting.
Yeah, and I think Dave brought up, this is a challenge for acquisition officials because this is different. This is, not the standard things we're used to doing here to out and buy a product. Betsy Hight, what do you think are some of the challenges you see that we still need to overcome to get where we want to go?
You can't simply pick up an application off of a server and put it into the cloud. So one of the hidden costs that most clients that we see having to grapple with is the actual application transformation that's required for that application to work well in a cloud environment. The entire concept of re-engineering their business processes is another cost that actually will pay huge dividends in the end, but is a time and resource cost for our clients. And finally, I think one of the other concepts that most organizations that are moving to the cloud don't realize is the actual process of deploying enterprise capabilities into a cloud environment. Once you're comfortable with the technology and the terms and conditions of the contract, but the actual physical movement will sometimes require an overlap period that organizations really did not bank on when they assumed that they could pretty easily move to the cloud. Moving to the cloud is the right thing to do. It takes time, it takes thought, and it takes governance.
Yeah, some great points there, because like data center consolidation, we don't want to consolidate data and move all of our old stuff into a new thing. And same thing with cloud here. We don't want to just move old things in and continue to try to operate the way we've been operating. We want to be able to modernize, streamline, and that business process re-engineering issue is a very important one too. We need concepts of operations of how are we going to operate in that cloud environment. Which is going to be a changed world for many agencies. Herb VanHook, what do you think? What are some of the challenges that you've experienced trying to get where you want to go, other than that security question?
One of the key things that shows up in survey after survey in the analyst community, and also within our own findings in our company, is that getting the technology to work, choosing the right technology, embracing it, is probably only about 20% of the equation of success. The rest of it is all this other stuff that we talk about. And I'll mention just a couple of things that we see. One is not just re-engineering the business processes. There is a huge body of processes around IT, the IT operational processes. And those all are affected and impacted, and they all often have to change. So the way people do change management, the way they traditionally did asset management, license management, things like that, is very different oftentimes in a cloud world. And I know, in fact, I had a conversation with someone at an agency probably a couple of years back, and they said, I can get a server in 7 minutes now. It still takes me 30 days to take care of the paperwork.
Yeah.
And because they've got existing legacy processes in place. So that's one of the big ones. Another one is sort of there's going to be an organizational transformation that has to go along with this technology transformation. New roles emerge, new jobs will emerge. How will we organize teams and groups around that? How will agencies, departments, tackle that? And then probably lastly is there's a cultural transformation that has to occur. If the idea that you can press a button or lift up a mobile device and get data instantly, get access to technology-enabled services instantly, that's going to change behavior, okay? That's going to change what people gravitate towards. I go back to this innovation question that came up earlier, and it's such as, well, if innovation is so easy in the cloud world, that means the cost of failure is a lot cheaper, okay? And that'll just change people's behavior.
Yeah, very good point. And you just saved me, Dave. Herb, we've been, it's our 93rd show, and until now in this show, no one brought up the issue culture, because we've had in our prior 92 shows, all of which have been around technology subjects, when we get to challenges, someone puts on the table the culture issue, and you just did, in terms of the fact that we're looking at, changing the way people behave, change the way things, and that right away creates a series of cultural issues. So very interesting that you brought that up. All right, we got about 11 minutes left to go in the show. We like to talk about the future as a way to wrap up. Let's share vision for the future. Let's think about if we're going through this process, what kinds of improvements are we going to see down the road? I mean, what exciting things are going to happen out in the road? Let's put on our look into the crystal ball and look down the road. Let's start with Dave McLaughlin. Dave, what do you see? Where's this all going in the future?
Well, I think as it's adopted more and the culture starts to change a little bit, you'll start to see people get more and more excited about the capabilities that they can do. So creating their own custom apps or a marketplace, or starting to build interoperability between different cloud providers. There's a whole host of things that is going to start to change within the industry. So for the people that are just starting to adopt it now and starting to understand it, they're going to put themselves pretty far ahead of the game when it comes to launching new technologies. So
terrific. So it's positioning in the market and getting out there and try to get ahead of that curve. Betsy Hight, what do you think? What's it look like? What's the future look like down the road? How will the world change and government change with the cloud computing world?
I think that the process of understanding what you need will be streamlined as a government employee. The amount of operations orchestration that's required to make cloud work is increasing every day, and those in industry and government alike who are researching that and developing standards for that are making huge progress. The level of automation among and between the components of the cloud environment and the client environment has increased, and we're seeing remarkable capabilities for not just the ability to respond in real time, but the ability to manage in real time over a much broader set of components. And finally, we're seeing the ability to manage those components in a heterogeneous environment across boundaries that are agreed to by both the provider and the client will increase our ability to trust the environment, to in some ways take it for granted because those capabilities are well defined and well understood, and more importantly for the government to procure those capabilities in a way that is understood by the procurement and acquisition community, by the clients who are actually using that capability, and by the providers. And finally, I think a big change will be the law. We will find more and more case law being developed to protect both consumers, whether they're government clients or private clients, as well as providers, to enable us to move in much more of a real-time, automated fashion that allows us to move at the speed of business.
Terrific. Sounds exciting to me. Chris Greer, what do you think? What's it look like down the road for you, Chris?
There are two areas that we're really excited about with respect to cloud, big data and mobile. On the big data side, we're used to, in the enterprise environment, the data you're used to and the questions you know you're supposed to ask, and that's sort of a conventional data arena. With cloud and big data, now we're in the area of data that are more complicated than allow you to be sure what it's telling you,
right.
And questions you haven't yet thought about asking, and that's a real space for innovation. On mobile, government where you are, the interaction between the edge device and cloud is really crucial for enabling maximum flexibility and innovation. There are implications in how you implement a cloud environment if you intend to implement mobile government. So the cloud structure is influenced by your mobile plan. The edge device and its implementation should take into account the structure of the cloud service. So we have to join these two topics together to make progress.
Yeah, and I think that's the trend. We're seeing that trend. Herb VanHook at BMC Software, what do you see? What's it look like in your crystal ball? Where's this all going? What's the world going to look like down the road?
Well, let's take a look back for a few years first. So if you think about every fundamental shift in technology that's happened, over time, it just becomes part of the fabric of technology. I mean, years ago, if you go back to the 90s, everyone was swarming around web-based technologies. Right. Go back to the 80s, it was client-server-based technologies. Right. I think what will happen is the technology innovation that's coming out of cloud computing and the business and operational model changes that are coming out of cloud computing and partner technologies such as mobile, such as big data, such as social media, in fact. I think if you look 10, 15, 20 years down the road, that's just the way information technology will happen then, okay, across the board. And it's the way that technology delivered services, whether citizen services, government services, mission services, will just be delivered that way. That's the way we will do IT. And maybe 10 years from now, we won't be talking about cloud computing. It'll just be IT.
Standard operating procedures.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good point. You know, it's interesting to watch the way technology's evolved, you know, and I've actually written a couple things on this too, from the 60s right up till now. You know, we've centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized, and I go back to the day of, you know, we talk cloud today. Why use our own resources? Let's move them out. I think of the days of time sharing. Remember those days? Why use our own computers? Let's just move the stuff out and we'll buy time from, you know, sort of like the precursor for what has grown into today, evolved back as that pendulum swing back to cloud computing. Dave McClure, what do you think? What's it look like down the road, Dave? Where is all this going, and how will the world change, and how will government change by these movement to cloud?
Well, as I sit here, you know, I had to think of what I'm going to say that's different from what everyone else has already said, so I'm working on it. Let me pull it together here.
Okay.
I don't think actually we're going to be contributing anything singularly to cloud computing. I think what's happening is a very unique instance in time. I call it the industrial revolution of data. Okay. We finally have three things coming together, perfect storm. We have open data, which is being pushed out of this administration with a lot of vigor, freeing up structured and unstructured data to make it consumable by citizens, by developers, by entrepreneurs. That's a rich environment that we've not really had before. You combine that with these powerful analytical tools that are now being created by companies that enable us to digest, consume, cut information in fractions of seconds that used to take us overnight or weeks to cut through. And add to that this uncanny computing environment that we call cloud, which gives us this massive processing capability to consume the data. You have this perfect storm, I think, that creates a new value equation in government that we've not ever had before. We have, as you've said, been focused on technology, or we've focused on information, or we've focused on policy, but this really creates a new environment for us where we can separate data, information, and content in ways that really add new value to what we are doing in government and how we're analyzing how well we're doing. So I think that's a huge shift. The other thing I would add is that I agree with Herb. I think we are creating an opportunity to create platforms for innovation, which we've not explored yet in the cloud environment. We are focused largely on infrastructure, on hosting, on software as a service. The platform space, I think, is the new frontier for us, where we can really create some synergies around how we package capabilities across the stacks that we manage in ways that create some enormous efficiencies and give us some computing power, again, that we didn't have before.
Fantastic, fantastic. Let me try to do some quick recaps here. We talked progress. Simply what I heard is yes, we're making progress. In terms of that private, public, we all see a mix. There's growth in all areas. Budget pressures, I think, are pushing more stuff towards the public side of things, but I think it's going to continue to evolve. Security, we talked about the need for transparency and trust. You mentioned FedRAMP being there. NIST is working on suites of controls and security reference architectures that are addressing those issues. We agreed a holistic approach is an opportunity, and we agreed there's an opportunity to improve security with cloud. Benefits, the obvious is cost, but I also heard a lot about flexibility, speed, innovation, and again, the possibility for better security when it comes to challenges, reliability and measurements, being able to understand what are we really getting, the portability, control, accountability, all these things become easier. In terms of challenges, though, we see the acquisition process being a challenge, governance processes, re-engineering of business processes, new concepts of operations, as well as the culture, the resistance to change culture that exists in many organizations. Future, we see customs apps, personal computing, big data and mobile computing are going to offer all kinds of opportunities. Perhaps this becomes the standard way we operate in the future. Like Dave's 3 points, open data plus big data analytics plus cloud is going to open up a whole new world of imagination. Open up things. Someone said to me, with the big data analytics and cloud, we'll no longer be finding the needle in the haystack, we'll be finding the needle in the needle haystack, or the needle stack, if you will, and so forth. I think in my mind, what I'm hearing, I think over time the agency clouds begin to evolve. I think agency clouds then will begin to say what can be done as government-wide clouds, and perhaps way out there in the future, we have agencies focused solely on their mission, and IT is a utility, and computing is just there. It's taken for granted like electricity would be today. I want to first thank our panelists for taking time from their very, very busy schedules to be here with us today.